Welcome back to the Drummer Mindset Podcast. I'm Joel Pereira. Today, I'm releasing an additional episode outside of my usual release times. I was excited to share this one with Scott Middleton of Basque. Basque is a heavy Appalachian psychedelic folk outfit out of Asheville, North Carolina. They're kind of hard to describe, but I highly recommend checking out their albums. Once you do, you won't need to know anything else. Well produced, well thought out, intentional band. And I'm excited to go see them tomorrow night. Tomorrow being December 16th, 2023. Tonight, you can also catch them in Chapel Hill. I'll put links in the show notes just so you know where to find them. In addition to Basque, he also is heavily involved with TRAP, the Rhythmic Arts Project out of Asheville, North Carolina. They focus on helping folks with emotional and physical and neurological disabilities. They have a multi-system approach, and he is heavily involved in the drum aspect of it, so really helping folks with coordination, and timing, rhythm, and all of that in connection with others. So it's really, really cool work. Definitely, if you're interested, check out the website, again, that I'm going to post in the show notes. Without further ado, here's Scott Middleton.
When you come in only as a musician, like all I had was private drum lessons over the years. And I went to Apple, I wanted to do music industry, but you still had to try out, I learned mallet instruments for the first time and how to tune percussion. But I was down here and everybody else was coming in at this level, and it's like the gap, it was overwhelming to shorten that gap, essentially. Ended up studying political science, haven't used that degree, but I got a degree finally, so.
I mean, I changed my major so many times, but I wasn't really focused on being a student until I went to community college here and become a paramedic, and then that's when I figured out how to study.
Nice.
And because that, you just have to have an emotional connection.
Man, I almost want to have a podcast and have you on it to talk about that work, because that's intense, and the people that can do that kind of work is I don't even know if I want to know what you've seen, but I mean, I do want to at the same time. I'm wow, it's...
Well, I think that it takes there's a specific kind of mindset and neurology to working in crisis, or an emergency situation, and people do it in all different kinds of ways. I like to kind of draw the correlation too with drumming is kind of that way too. Music in general is that way, but in drumming, using your whole body, paying so much attention, dividing your attention among everyone, to listen and figure out what's going on, and it's very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To being in public safety.
A lot of sensitivity and reading the room, I'm sure, and to the max, though, to the extreme.
Right.
It seems like.
Yeah, and what I find too is I think for most folks, there's a lot of with those emergency settings, it can be overwhelming at first, but if you're given a job to do, it makes it easier to cope with that stuff. And then also there's this perspective of folks that have high anxiety already. And then they're good in a crisis situation because it's the world has risen to their level of concern.
I got this.
Exactly. It's this is familiar ground for me, so let me take charge at this point. So it's definitely interesting, but I'm always trying to connect the dots and stuff with all my past lives of things I've done in the past and stuff like that and drumming. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of the projects that you've been doing, not just Basque, but also your drum teaching and all that stuff. But we got a little bit already of just kind of going through App State. So did you play in bands and stuff in college?
Not really. I kind of fell out of music up there, Sally. I didn't really find my niche at App music-wise, and I had to struggle in college a little bit to the point where I was buckle down and, study, make sure I didn't flunk out, because I had some bad grades here and there, and it took me a while to figure out how to do well in college, essentially, because high school was a breeze for me, a pretty much A student. And then when I got to college, I was oh man, I actually have to work.
Yeah.
It was new and foreign to me to have to put that much work in to do well. I started working with students and people with disabilities in 2007, at App, in group home settings, job coaching, out in the community, and even at that time, I would incorporate my drum kit with the guys for them to just get their music out, get their stuff out, whether it's their emotions or just whatever, and just get it out on the drum kit. So when the opportunity came up in 2013 for me to go out to Santa Barbara, California, and get trained in the rhythmic arts project out there. I jumped at it because I wasn't really happy with my job at the time. I was still doing work with people with disabilities, but it wasn't the right fit for me.
Okay.
Like I wanted to, just use music to open people up and give them a different voice that they might not have otherwise. So got trained in that in 2013. I brought it back to Asheville, and I've been growing it and developing it in mostly Western North Carolina ever since. So my motto is like, have drums, will travel. And essentially, though, it's just education, empowerment through drums and music, and it's a fun way to connect with people, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like it's varied clients that you'll work with, or students.
Yeah.
Like with all different backgrounds of issues that are going on, and maybe no issues. Or...
Yeah, and ages too. Like I'm not even sure the age range I work with. Anything from like, I've probably worked with like 4-year-olds to like 80-year-olds.
Wow.
So I work with people with Down syndrome, autism, like Fragile X. I did a camp this past March with people with Williams syndrome, and that was really unique. It's a little bit more of a rare disability, but a very fun population to work with. And recently I did my first trap class. I had a place for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and that was interesting as well. Like there's some similarities there, but that's a realm I'm not as familiar with, but a population that also needs music to tap back into grounding themselves. And I saw that in that class. Like we played one song for a lady and that she had requested, and she seemed, kind of in her own place most of the time, or like in her own little world. And then we played the song that she requested, and like you could see like the joy was back on her face. She was like more present again, and like that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
How that happens. Working with folks with other neurological developmental issues like Down syndrome and all the things that kind of come up with that, from coordination to language development and all, and the auditory sensation. Like it's been something that's really been promoted and is a part of their therapy anyway. And it can be done in a clinical way with buzzers and lights and these kinds of things. But to be able to bring the drum in and just have that be kind of the focus is really awesome.
Yeah, that's cool seeing people open up through music. I saw it earlier this morning too. I was working with a individual on the autism spectrum that was nonverbal, and kind of like you're saying about the EMS stuff or the paramedic work, like I wasn't sure how to gauge him just yet, kind of going in slowly and not getting into space too much, and just seeing what he was capable of. We made some progress, and it was cool to see what he could do, like playing different colors on 4 different drums and reading music essentially. Not totally independently, but slowly getting there. Yeah. And then by the end, we blasted "We Will Rock You," and then like he was pretty non-effect most of the time, like not much expression on his face. But by the time we were playing "We Will Rock You" at the end of our session, there was like this small smile that was creeping on his face, and he was, seeing that compared to being like non-affected most of the time was a small little victory,
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been doing that now here. You said you did the training in 2013. Yep. So for the past 10 years, and you're traveling how many miles, like a week or month?
Oh, man, I don't even know if I want to know. Okay. Tomorrow morning I'm working in Cherokee at a day program. So yeah, I'm all over the place. I work in the Charlotte region a good bit. Okay. And in the past year, I was lucky to work with ETSU's Access program. Oh, wow. Which is a college program for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, which has been a cool thing in the past maybe decade or so, that a lot of colleges have these programs now for people to go to after they graduate high school, because there is a bit of a void. It's like either you get a job, at a grocery store or a Target or whatever, and sometimes there's not as many options as people would like, because some parents don't want to put their loved ones in a day program necessarily,
Sure. And in so many cases too, like, they can level up, they don't have to just be shut-ins. Like they can be contributing members of society and hold jobs and all that.
Yeah. Just take some opportunity and patience from support staff. But that's what I see all the time in drumming is, I've been thinking about it lately is, I'm amazed to see what I can do with students, but not surprised. You just got to give them the chance, Yeah. Especially with like doing some virtual lessons with guys that mostly have Down syndrome. It's like they're with a few visual cues, they're reading and playing like rock beats, and like that's so impressive. And like we've been working on more like jazzy triplets, like different versions of triplets.
Okay.
And, you know, I'll write out a couple X's, X for, you know, any given symbol, usually the ride. And then I'll do like a red color swatch that they have on their drum at their house. That's the snare drum hit. So yeah, XX drum, XX red, XX red. Like they're rocking triplets pretty well. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll send you some videos of that too.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
I think, I love seeing it. Like they're great at what they do.
Tell me, when did you start playing drums?
Around 15, 16,
Okay.
I started taking it seriously. Like I don't remember the exact age, but I saw the modern drummer at my mom's house that I vaguely remember like kicking it all off. It was Travis Barker right when he was starting to get huge, bald head at the time. I think this was 2001. So yeah, I would have been like 15-ish during that time. And I always remember I was kind of forced early on to take drum lessons, and I got a little bit out of it. But then a year or so later, I'd weaned out of it. But then I was like, I want to take lessons. It was like, this is my choice this time.
Right.
And that's when I remember I got much more out of it.
Got it.
Which is kind of a good life lesson, right?
For sure. Yeah, it's again like that emotional connection to actually begin to learn and ingrain it all, you know. It can be much less of a hurdle if you can just capture that interest. So tell me about the Basque and like how y'all have been together now for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so there's been some, you know, obviously pandemic, like for a lot of folks, put a halt on a lot of things, but y'all have kind of recommitted, it sounds like, to begin playing again.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And it's funny how it coincides with like starting Trap of Asheville in 2013. But yeah, that was another thing that was just nose to the grindstone. And I feel like the only reason we have had a small bit of success is because we were just stubborn and determined, and maybe a little bit hard-headed at times. Because Ray, the guitarist, and we met in 2011 when I first moved to Asheville. And we were jamming for like a year and a half in his bedroom at times, in my basement that was often leaking water. Like demoing and writing riffs that would eventually become American Hollow, our first album.
Yeah.
And then we finally found Jesse, our bassist, through Craigslist of all places. We had the right influences, you know, like Deftones, this and that, obscure metal band or two that he also knew, and he had touring experience and awesome gear, some huge bass cabs, and we clicked with him pretty early on. And then we added Zeb right to the fold, and he came in on lead vocals and guitar. And it's funny, I was just telling this story. Like, if you love it, let it go. Like, he was at UNCA at the time, and he was, you know, overwhelmed with school, had a lot on his plate. So he tried out. It went well. But then a month or two went by to where he had to do school stuff, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. But he came back into the fold, and so this was, fall of 2013. Had our first show at what was then the Auditorium in December of 2013, now the Odd. And we've just been chugging away ever since. Had some good breaks with some luck for sure, but we definitely hit the road pretty hard back in like 2013 to 2015 to hopefully earn those breaks.
Yeah. And did you have the album before you started touring?
I honestly don't remember when. I think we had a bit of a pressing issue with American Hollow. I think we played the release show and the album still was not out yet, and so I think we had to like issue vouchers or something. And that was a bit of a learning curve. And there's so many in the music industry of like, you know, I still have a hard time wrapping my head around the industry of how long it takes vinyl to come out. You know, how many sides wax can be, you know, or how many minutes per side, excuse me. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too, I've listened to, you know, all the records, and it just seems like they've all been well mixed, well produced, and like time went into it is what it seemed like.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot of time in particular for our last recording 3 that we put out on Season of Mist Records, which is out of Marseille, France. And we're very honored to be a part of that label. It's like an international metal label, and they have stateside offices in Philly. But when we got that news in 2018 that they're interested in us, that was a pretty big milestone for us at the time. Like, you know, you grow up as a kid, dreaming of getting a record deal, and we had some tour mates in 2018 that were on that label. So just kind of timing, some luck, and just, you know, the right people seeing us led to that as well.
Nice.
Back to the work that went into it. I remember we were putting in felt like 15 or 20 hours a week to make 3 happen. As we get older, though, we're not go until like 1 or 2 in the morning anymore.
Right.
Like we used to do that in the early days, and at the more unglorious practice spaces, which were just like a storage space, that we actually ended up practicing in one night at like when it was like 5 degrees outside in the winter.
Yeah.
Pretty chilly in there.
So it sounds like, I mean, and you had some gaps in your playing, though. It sounds like in college, like trying to buckle down, and you weren't really playing, at least in bands. Did you still practice? Or
a little bit. Not as intentionally as I would like to, but a little bit here and there. And it's funny, when I first moved to Asheville, the thing that broke me out of the slump was playing in a country cover band.
Okay.
And like late teen me would have thought that was ridiculous, but then I was like 24, 25 at the time. And just hearing like old school Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Willie, all the classic stuff. I was like, man, this is just working class blues that is really heartfelt, and it's fun playing train beats,
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't give it the proper respect prior to that I think it now deserves. But we had a lot of fun. It's called the Broken Bottles, and we didn't last very long just playing covers, but it was good to get out of my playing funk with something like that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm finding something similar right now. Like I've kind of like train beats is something I've kind of put on the back burner for a long period of time. I've always liked that kind of music, but it's just, as the drummer, I looked at it and kind of wrote it off pretty quickly as like, looks kind of boring. But there's some detail in it, and then you can get a really nice bounce into it as well. Can't sleep on it. So you had some country experience, but obviously there was a lot of metal influence early on. The way that it's been Basque has been described as kind of like Appalachian doom, but maybe a little bit more soul. I should back up, because doom, I think, also the soul is not devoid. Like, it's not devoid of soul.
Exactly.
But it's like it's a little bit different when you have are unique to me anyway with that southern feel and all of that. So how did y'all come to that?
Not totally intentionally, and there's definitely a lot of push and pull in the band. Like, especially early on, I wanted to be like, let's be metal, let's be heavy, and I'm always down to go to that area. But I know we pride ourselves on dynamics too, because if you're loud and heavy 100% of the time, then like there's with no contrast, that doesn't do much for us, I think, as listeners and as players.
Right.
And that's just like the natural way our sound comes out. Like our singer is from Wilkesboro, North Carolina, which I think is a pretty kind of famous bluegrass territory. I mean, that's where Merle Fest is, and I think his playing showcases a lot of that. Like he plays the banjo on the last song, Maiden Mother Crone, off of 3, so you can hear that influence. And then Ray Worth, our other guitarist, is from Appalachia, Lexington, Virginia area. And then there's two originally damn Yankees in the band. I was, being born in upstate New York, but I mostly grew up in the South. And then Jesse, our bassist, is from Hudson Valley area of New York. So it's a weird mixture of like a lot of us growing up in like hardcore metalish scenes, and maybe then Zeb maybe a little bit more like indie folky scenes, and then I think you can maybe hear a little bit of that in the sound. We pride ourselves on being like the heaviest band on like an indie bill, and then like the lightest band on a true metal bill. We're like that weird band that can toe the line in between, but we do take pride in that, because I think a lot of our favorite artists are like that in a way.
Yeah, I've been enjoying it ever since I heard about y'all. So it's been fun to kind of learn about everything that's going on in town here. And so the metal scene is not something that I'm totally aware of, but I mean, it's something that I've enjoyed in different ways, probably more on the prog end of things, with Tool and things like that. But a lot of the bands you mentioned too. But yeah, so how is the metal scene here? How do you find it?
I think the music scene in general is awesome. The band we're playing with at Eulogy on December 16th, Serrate. I haven't seen them live yet, but it's like kind of a throwback to old school 2000s, early 2000s, like metallic hardcore. There's a lot of black metal in town. That's good. So like usually happening at the Odd, it seems like. There's a band called All Hell out of here. That's a black metal band. They've been doing well for themselves in recent years with like a pretty big label they signed to. And I'm really impressed these days though by this is my other like yin to my yang. I love metal and heavy stuff, but then I love ambient experimental stuff as well. And we have a really good experimental ambient scene in town these days. It seems like Eulogy, the new venue, is doing a good job and like trying to cultivate that. And fill the void that the Mothlight left, which was
Yeah.
our go-to venue over the years.
Yeah, I heard from a lot of folks it was there. I'd seen maybe one or two shows there, and then they closed pretty soon after we moved back here. But yeah, I heard from a number of musicians it was their favorite place to play.
Yeah, that place was special, and not to be cheesy, but I remember I shed a tear or two that day, like during the pandemic when I found out it was closing down, and I always like to describe it as it was our cheers.
Yeah.
Like I played in a band called Via. It was like a post-rock shoegazy, more electronic band for a handful of years, 3-4 years or so. I met them at the Mothlight, just playing a show together or sharing the stage. And then awesome drummer Tom Nguyen in town that I mentioned to you.
Yeah. I've heard of Tom. Yeah.
Exceptional drummer. I met him at the Mothlight, and like I feel like maybe a dozen other friends or so over the years. And the community there was great. And I feel like I was there in its heyday, like on a weekly basis or maybe twice a week or more, you know. And what they had a great ethos too is like they would book everything from metal, punk, folk, indie to like the most random free jazz stuff that like their ethos was like, hey, if we like it, we're gonna book it. Like if there's 5 people here that really love it, like, and that's great. And if it doesn't have to be a sellout every show, but we're gonna, you know, just have awesome like artistic integrity about it.
Yeah. You've got this show coming up in Asheville for the part of this week-long tour for kind of the 10-year anniversary of the band. So tell me a little bit. So you've already said like you're playing with Serrate. Is there another band on the?
Yeah, and Zombie Queen. They've been around in Asheville for forever, and it's a reunion show for them.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of punks are coming out of the woodwork to see them reunite because it's been a few years since they've played. So that'll be pretty awesome. And we've shared the stage with them before, and yeah, they're always pretty high energy and pretty fun.
Nice. And how long will each set be, do you think?
I think theirs will both be between 30 and 45, and we'll be doing a full hour just to celebrate the 10-year span of the band and make sure we play a few songs off of each album. We have 3 full lengths, and we have a brand new tune that I'm excited to play for everybody that no one has heard yet.
Okay.
We've demoed it, and it's a little bit proggier for us. It's high energy, I feel like, and I'm excited to debut that.
Nice.
At Eulogy, Saturday, December 16th here in Asheville.
Okay.
And the best thing about the show is it's free for our 10-year anniversary tour.
Wow.
And Burial Beer also made a dry aged stout on nitro for us. So it's similar to Guinness, but like their take on that. And it's called Rid of You, which is a title of one of our songs off of our last album, 3.
Okay.
So you can get that on tap at Eulogy, and hopefully we'll cheers to 10 years of being a band.
You're still coming out with new music and stuff, so this isn't like a finale kind of a tour.
Oh,
either.
no, not by any means. We're hoping to record in the next half year or so, but with vinyl turnaround these days, I can't really guess when that would necessarily come out. But
can you share where you will record?
We have a couple ideas stewing around in the pot. That's to be determined as well. We need to write and kind of put the bows on a few other songs before we kind of decide what to do with it next.
Where have you recorded the other 3 albums?
So American Hollow, our debut, was quite an experience. We recorded in a cabin in the woods, kind of like Mars Hill area of North Carolina, with our buddy Chris Scary Adams. He's out of Savannah, Georgia, and plays in a band called Black Tusk. Okay. And he's like a staple of the punk hardcore metal scene, and he's put out a lot of albums if you want to check out Chris Scary Adams. And then our second album we recorded in Johnson City, Tennessee at Fahrenheit Studios with Travis Kameyer, and he's an awesome guitarist and bassist. He plays with a Generation of Vipers in a band called Hal. I recommend both of them. Generation of Vipers is like sludgier, kind of progressive, heavy stuff, and then Hal is like amazing space rock that should be huge. If this world was just, it would be huge right now.
Okay.
But yeah, he got some awesome tones for us on Ramble Beyond, our second album. And then our third one we recorded right here in Asheville with Matt Bayless. That was kind of a dream come true. He's worked with some of my favorite bands. One of the most famous ones would be Pearl Jam. He's worked with a lot over the years. He's done some work with Mastodon early on, and then one of my favorite bands, ISIS the band, as they have to say nowadays, like sadly. But yeah, we did that at Echo Mountain, and I'll just never forget with those high ceilings. I hit like my big floor tom, and it seemed like it rang for 20 seconds or so. Like just the drum sounds we got in that room were huge, and it was great to record here in our hometown and like what's arguably the most famous studio here in Asheville, and it was a good time.
Yeah. What is your practice like these days? Like how often do you get to sit at your own kit and play?
I want to be a little bit more diligent with my own personal practice, honestly. And when I do try to push myself, I attempt jazz. I can't say I'm a jazz guy yet, but I attempt it. And I took a virtual lesson in the past few months with Jeff Sipe out of Brevard.
Yeah.
And he's got a book out that I've been working out of a good bit. And he's just like a jazz rock fusion legend. Like, yeah, I've seen him live a few times, and he just does stuff that blows my mind. And he's like really humble. Like, he just seems like a Zen master. So if you ever get a chance to see Jeff Sipe around the Asheville area or Western North Carolina, do yourself a favor, even if you're not into fusion or whatever. Like, he has a name for a reason.
Absolutely. Whenever I see him, I just can't. I'm always surprised, and not surprised, but just impressed with his touch, his technique, and his feel. And just at any moment, like, you can kind of see him adjusting for everything that's going on. It's like he's hyper aware of everything that's happening in the soundscape and can just meet that. It's really, I agree, something to behold for sure.
Yeah, he's a master.
Yeah.
And yeah, when it comes to bask, we stay pretty busy. We do a few Sundays each month, and then pretty much every Tuesday is our practice day.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if you're not getting on the kit alone, you're still getting, you're getting a lot of playtime.
Yeah.
Like, your mind's there as you're teaching. And if you can teach it, that's supposed to really help out with like ingraining some of these things, even if it's basics, and especially like it's probably a good thing to kind of revisit for folks too. So yeah, you're all drumming all the time.
Mostly, yeah. I mean, I'm always wanting to get more music centric all the time. But yeah, it is unique how teaching changes your perspective on things. Like,
tell me,
it's the nitty gritty of opening the hi-hat when you're working with a intro student, often related to doing a manual clutch, when your foot's going down on the kick drum, well, depending on what you're playing, but your left foot will be doing something opposite. So just getting to those nitty gritty details that we take for granted can be eye-opening and kind of overwhelming at times. It's like, oh man, I never considered that, because once you get to a certain point, you're kind of just, you're going off the cuff and not
just in auto.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. You're not dissecting everything that you're playing, like, I don't know about you, but when I'm playing behind the kit, I'm not like, here comes, a 30-second note or a 16th. Like, it's definitely a little bit more autopilot and in the moment. But I always want to like understand more music theory but know those rules to be able to break them, essentially.
Exactly.
That's definitely my motto. Like, I definitely want to understand that stuff, but don't be confined by it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can often be kind of a good launching off point, Cool. Well, what are there any specific techniques, skills on the drums that you're still working? You said jazz, like that's something you're still trying to work on, your jazz chops and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I've been working on some various triplet exercises that's out of Jeff Sipe's recent book. So yeah, just different triplets between the ride and the snare, mostly for the time being, and you can move them around the kit. But that's been challenging enough. Like, when I took a lesson with him, he had me play like a bar of swing and then a bar of like these broken up triplets, and like I think there's like either 6 or 9 different variations of how you can play triplets between your right and left hand, and it's just going through all those. But keeping time on 2 and 4 on the hats after a bar of regular swing time was actually more challenging to me than I would have thought. So I've got work to do. And then, I just need to get back to basics in a lot of ways, just working on 16th notes on the hands with a click, and just getting decent with a click. I feel like it's taken me 10 years or more.
Yeah.
It's a lifetime's pursuit for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, do you recall any other blocks that you've kind of been able to bust through?
I think for any musician, like, constantly feeling more comfortable on stage can be a block. And it seems to be like a muscle you build over the years, and it kind of can waver at times, but I guess you just can't overthink it though,
Yeah.
But the more you do it, it does seem the easier it gets typically. So that could be a bit of a mental block at times, but it's just, if you ever feel overwhelmed by it, just look at your bandmates, feel the music, and you just shut the crowd out a little bit to some extent.
Yeah, just kind of begin again. And is it any different for you when you're like on tour versus when you're playing a hometown gig?
Like the vibe of a tour gig versus hometown.
Yeah.
There seems to be a little bit more pressure for a hometown at times because, a lot of faces in the crowd, and you want to play well. You might have some family there, and you got a lot of friends there.
Right.
So maybe a little more pressure when it comes to the hometown. But for me, when we're in a major city, like if we're in Brooklyn and stuff, I feel a pressure in a good way because you're in a mecca of arts and awesome music. Like every corner you go, whether it's jazz or rock, whatever. So yeah, I like that bit of pressure. Like when we play Brooklyn or a bigger city, like for me, I tell myself like, yeah, I need to bring it because there's so many options here in this town or in this city. So
nice.
I do like that pressure a little bit.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Hey, I was impressed with our phone conversation and your knowledge of a little bit more the scientific, therapeutic side of the drumming stuff. Like, I probably need to get more well versed on the science of it. But yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and the work that you're doing, and what we had, talked about before was music is something that's always been understood to be able to help with those kinds of things. But I also find it fascinating because the drum set itself is relatively new. It's an innovation that occurred, I guess, 100 years ago out of necessity because it was too expensive to pay 5 different people to play these different instruments. So, hey, can't one person do all these? How that came out and who that attracted and all that kind of stuff is just fascinating. Yeah, so I think that there's something worth following with that.
Definitely.
Sure.
Often when I teach a group class, people come up to me and be like, "Oh, I don't have any rhythm," and I hate that mindset. Because to some extent, I get that some people are tone deaf when it comes to singing, but like when it comes to rhythms, like if you can just start by counting to 4 or even counting to 3, whatever time you want to play in, that's half the battle. And I feel like rhythm and voice are just both so primal, but rhythm is so teachable in my opinion. Like I didn't come out of the womb, drumming. For me, it was definitely a pursuit I had to learn. It was maybe a little bit natural for me as a teenager when I first started smacking on drums, but I didn't know what I was doing. And so yeah, when people tell me that, I'm just like, no, it's teachable. You just got to try, and it can be a skill set gained for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. Well, that was Scott Middleton. So glad he came over. What an admirable dude. He plays with a lot of heart. He, engages with the community in a really meaningful way, and also produces the art that he does. So I just think he's, very excited to have him on. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to really sign off. We kind of just trailed off and kept talking and then started playing and everything. And so sorry I missed that for you, but stay tuned for the next one. And don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and leave a 5-star review if you're feeling up to it. But otherwise, take care and have a good holiday season.